I wake up before the sun rises. The alarm blares in my ear, but I'm already halfway out of bed. My body has long since learned not to expect rest. My name is Elena. I'm 40 years old, but most days I feel older. My life has been a constant struggle, a race I never asked to run. I grew up in a poor family, and from the moment I could, I worked. My parents did their best, but there was never enough. Not enough money, not enough time, not enough comfort. Now, years later, I find myself in a life that isn't much different. My husband Mark is 50. 6 months ago he had a stroke. A strong, capable man brought to his knees in an instant. He had always been the provider, the one who carried the weight of our household. But now the weight is on my shoulders. I don't complain, I never have, but there are nights when I sit alone in the dark, staring at my hands, wondering how much more they can endure. I work 2 jobs. By day, I'm a cashier at a supermarket, scanning groceries for tired mothers and impatient businessmen. By night, I clean offices, empty, silent places that feel like a different world from my own. My feet ache, my back is stiff, and exhaustion clings to me like a second skin. But I keep going. I have to. The only thing that keeps me from crumbling under the pressure is my son, Daniel. He's 18, a college student with dreams far bigger than our small, struggling home. He's the best thing in my life. Every morning before he leaves for school, he makes me coffee. He knows I won't stop to make it for myself. Some days when I come home late, I find that he's already cooked dinner, waiting up to make sure I eat. "You don't have to do all this," I tell him every time. His answer is always the same. "I want to, Mom." Sometimes I think about what I must look like to him. Tired, worn down, always on the edge of exhaustion. I wonder if he's ever resented me for not being the kind of mother who could take him on vacations, buy him expensive clothes, or even just sit down without worrying about bills. But if he does, he never shows it. Instead, he helps. Daniel picks up extra shifts at the campus bookstore. He makes sure the house is clean before I come home. He takes care of Mark when I can't, helping his father get dressed, making sure he takes his medication. I should be the one taking care of them. But more and more it feels like Daniel is the one holding everything together. One evening, after a long shift, I come home to find him sitting at the kitchen table, books spread out in front of him. The sight of him like this, focused, determined, fills me with pride. "You're still up?" I ask, setting my purse down. He looks up and smiles, but there's something behind his eyes. "Worry?" "Yeah. Just studying." I take a seat across from him, rubbing my temples. "You don't have to wait up for me, you know." "I know." He hesitates, then closes his textbook. "Mom, I was thinking." There's something in his voice that makes my stomach tighten. "Thinking about what?" "I could get a second job. Help out more." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. "No," I say quickly. "You're already doing too much. Your job is school, Daniel. Not this." He sighs. "But you're killing yourself, Mom. I see it every day. You come home and you can barely stand sometimes." I look away, unable to meet his eyes. I don't want him to see the truth in them. "I'll be fine," I say, forcing a smile. "I've always managed." "That's not the point." His voice is quiet but firm. "You don't have to do this alone." Something inside me cracks. For years I have carried everything on my back, never letting myself pause, never letting myself break. But in this moment, looking at my son, the boy I raised, the boy who has somehow become my anchor, I feel the weight lessen just a little. I reach across the table and take his hand. His fingers are warm, strong. He has grown up so fast. "Thank you," I whisper. For a moment there are no words. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. Then he squeezes my hand. "Always, Mom." And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, I believe that maybe, just maybe, we'll be okay. 2 days. In 2 days I would turn 41, but I hardly thought of it as anything special. Birthdays had long since become just another day, one filled with work, responsibilities, and exhaustion. In my younger years I used to dream about celebrating, about having people around, laughter filling the house. But life had other plans. My husband, Mark, used to take me out for dinner on my birthday back when things were different, before his stroke. Now he could barely sit up on his own, let alone plan a celebration. And I never expected anything anyway. I had grown used to letting the day pass unnoticed. But Daniel, my son, my heart, had other ideas. I had just come home from work when he looked at me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Excitement? Determination? "Go on, Mom," he said with a small smile. It's my birthday gift to you. A full week of rest and enjoyment. I stared at him, not sure if I had heard correctly. What? I laughed, shaking my head. Daniel, you know I can't afford to take time off work. It's already taken care of, he interrupted. I talked to your boss. I froze. What? She agreed, he said as if it were the simplest thing in the world. She said you've been working too hard anyway. I felt my knees go weak. This wasn't just a day off. A whole week. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes and I covered my mouth with my hand. No one had ever done anything like this for me. Daniel chuckled, stepping closer and pulling me into his arms. Come on, Mom. You deserve this. I clung to him, overwhelmed. He wasn't a little boy anymore. He was a man, gentle, caring, and so incredibly thoughtful. I had raised him, but somehow he had also become my protector, my rock. And so my birthday week began. The first thing I saw when I woke up was the bouquet. Not just a small handful of flowers, but a grand, breathtaking bouquet of deep red roses, white lilies, and delicate baby's breath, arranged so beautifully it looked like something out of a dream. I gasped. No one had ever given me anything like this before. Beside it, a handwritten note. Asterisk, happy early birthday, Mom. Just the beginning of a week you'll never forget. Sis. I pressed the card to my chest, feeling warmth bloom inside me. I hadn't felt this cherished in years. The smell of coffee drifted into my room, rich and inviting. A few moments later, Daniel appeared at the door, balancing a tray. Good morning, birthday girl, he grinned. I laughed, sitting up. It's not my birthday yet. Close enough, he shrugged, placing the tray on my lap. I stared at it in disbelief. On the plate was a perfectly arranged breakfast. Fluffy pancakes in the shape of a heart, topped with fresh strawberries and syrup. Scrambled eggs on the side, golden and light. A steaming cup of my favorite coffee, just the way I liked it. I looked up at him, my voice catching. Daniel, you didn't have to. I wanted to, he said firmly, sitting on the edge of the bed. You do everything for us. For once, let me take care of you. I picked up a forkful of pancakes, my hands trembling slightly. This is the best breakfast I've ever had, I admitted. His grin widened. And it's only the beginning. I had never been the kind of woman who expected grand gestures. But Daniel, he made sure my birthday was unforgettable. First, he ran me a warm bath, filling it with scented oils and bubbles. Relax, he said, handing me a glass of orange juice. I'm making lunch. Lunch? I echoed, wide-eyed. He winked. You'll see. I had barely dried off when he called me to the dining table. Laid out before me was an incredible meal, creamy pasta, garlic bread, and a fresh salad. Candles flickered, casting a soft glow across the room. When did you learn to cook like this? Asked, still in awe. He smirked. YouTube tutorials. And a little practice while you were at work. I couldn't stop smiling. As the day faded into night, Daniel led me outside. He had set up a small table in the backyard, fairy lights twinkling above us. A slice of homemade cake sat on a plate in front of me. Make a wish, Mom. I hesitated. What could I possibly wish for when I already had the greatest gift sitting across from me? I closed my eyes and blew out the candle, feeling a peace I hadn't known in years. Daniel reached across the table, taking my hand in his. You're not just my mom, you know, he said softly. You're my best friend. Tears welled in my eyes again and I squeezed his hand. I love you, Daniel. His fingers tightened around mine. I love you too, Mom. Always. And in that moment I knew, this was a birthday I would never forget. For the first time in years I did nothing. At first it felt strange. My hands itched to be busy, to clean something, to cook, to work, to do anything. I wasn't used to sitting still. I had spent my entire life moving, pushing forward, making sure everyone else was taken care of. But Daniel wouldn't let me. Every time I tried to help, whether it was preparing dinner or checking on my husband, he stopped me. Mom, please, he said gently but firmly. This is your time to rest. But your father. I've got it covered, he reassured me. I know you worry, but trust me, I won't let anything happen to him. It was difficult to let go. My husband had always been my responsibility. Since his stroke, I had been the one to feed him, dress him, and make sure he was comfortable. But Daniel had taken over completely. He sat with him, adjusted his pillows, helped him eat, even read to him in the evenings. I watched quietly from the couch, my heart swelling with emotions I couldn't name. Pride, gratitude, love. My son had grown into a man before my eyes and I hadn't even noticed. And he made sure I knew just how much he appreciated me. Throughout the day he kept showering me with compliments. "Mom, you look beautiful today," he said with a warm smile as I sat on the couch sipping tea. I laughed softly, brushing my hair back. "Daniel, I haven't even done anything." "You don't have to," he replied simply. "You're beautiful just as you are." Every time he passed by he would pause to hug me. Sometimes he'd kiss the top of my head, other times he'd squeeze my hands. I couldn't remember the last time someone had made me feel this cherished, this loved. By the time the sun began to set, I was in a state of complete relaxation. I had forgotten what it was like to feel this way, light, unburdened, at peace. But Daniel wasn't finished with his surprises. In the evening, as I sat in the living room watching the golden light fade through the windows, he walked in with a small, elegant box in his hands. "What's this?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. He grinned. "Open it." I hesitated, then carefully lifted the lid. My breath caught in my throat. Inside was the most beautiful red dress I had ever seen. It was stunning, deep crimson silky fabric that shimmered under the light. It wasn't just any dress. It was the kind of dress a woman wore when she wanted to feel elegant, powerful, unforgettable. "Daniel," I whispered, running my fingers over the delicate fabric. "This is too much." He knelt beside me, taking my hand. "Nothing is too much for you, Mom." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I want you to get dressed," he continued. "We're going out. Be ready in half an hour." I blinked at him. "Out? Where?" He only smiled. "You'll see." I held the dress against me, still unsure. "Daniel, I haven't worn something this nice in years. I don't even know if it will." "Mom." He cut me off, his voice gentle but insistent. "Just trust me." I couldn't argue with him. I went to my room, slipping into the dress carefully, almost reverently. It fit perfectly, hugging my curves in all the right places, draping beautifully down to my knees. I hadn't felt this elegant in a long time. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. She wasn't just a tired mother, a woman worn down by years of struggle. She was someone else. Someone vibrant, alive. For the first time in years I felt beautiful. I stepped out of the room hesitantly, smoothing my hands over the fabric. Daniel was waiting for me in the living room, adjusting the cuffs of his dress shirt. When he looked up and saw me, he froze. His eyes widened, his breath catching for just a second. "Mom?" he exhaled, standing up. His gaze swept over me, filled with something I couldn't quite place. "You look..." He trailed off, shaking his head as if words weren't enough. I felt warmth spread through my chest, my cheeks heating under his gaze. "You really think so?" I asked softly. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "I know so." For a moment neither of us moved. The air between us felt different, charged, heavy with something unspoken. Then he smiled, holding out his arm. "Come on," he said, his voice warm and low. "Your night isn't over yet." I took his arm, letting him lead me outside. And for the first time in my life I felt like a woman who truly deserved to be celebrated. When I stepped outside, the air was crisp, carrying the soft scent of the city at night. Daniel guided me to the car, opening the passenger door with a small bow. "After you, my lady," he said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Where did you learn to be so charming?" "I have my secrets," he replied with a grin. As he drove, I sat in silence, feeling the smooth fabric of my red dress beneath my fingers, still overwhelmed by everything that had happened that day. It was surreal, being pampered, taken care of, celebrated. It had been so long since I had been treated this way, and even longer since I had allowed myself to feel truly special. Daniel glanced over at me. "You okay?" I turned to him, smiling. "More than okay." "Good," he said. "Because tonight is only beginning." I frowned playfully. "What else could you possibly have planned?" "You'll see." I watched the city lights blur past the window, feeling a thrill of excitement I hadn't felt in years. When was the last time I had been out like this? Had a night that was just for me? I couldn't even remember. As we drove deeper into the heart of the city, Daniel finally pulled into a sleek modern building. From the outside, it didn't look particularly extraordinary, until I noticed the rooftop terrace, glowing softly under golden lights. My heart skipped a beat. "Daniel," I breathed. He simply smiled, stepping out of the car and walking around to open my door. "Come on." I took his hand, letting him lead me inside. The elevator ride was silent, except for the quiet hum of the music playing through the speakers. I felt my pulse quicken as the numbers ticked higher, my breath catching as the doors finally slid open. I stepped out and gasped. We were on the rooftop of the high-rise, surrounded by an open-air terrace with breathtaking views of the city. Soft music played in the background and warm golden string lights wrapped around the edges, casting a gentle glow over everything. Small, intimate tables were scattered around, and the stars above twinkled as if they had come out just for me. It was the most romantic setting I had ever seen. My feet felt frozen to the ground. I turned to Daniel, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is like a fairy tale?" he finished for me, his smile widening. I nodded, unable to form words. He led me to our table, which was set apart from the others, positioned near the railing where the view stretched endlessly in every direction. He pulled out my chair, waiting for me to sit before taking his place across from me. The flickering candlelight reflected in his eyes, making them look warmer, softer. "I still can't believe you did all this," I said, my voice laced with awe. He shrugged casually. "You deserve it, Mom. More than anyone I know." Before I could respond, the waiter arrived, presenting us with an elegant menu. Everything felt so luxurious, far beyond what I was used to. "Daniel," I whispered, leaning in. "This place must be so expensive." He simply smirked. "Don't worry about it. Just enjoy yourself." I studied him for a moment. His posture was different tonight, poised, confident, his movements smooth and deliberate. He didn't just look older, he felt older. There was something about the way he carried himself, the way he held my gaze a second longer than usual. He behaved like a perfect gentleman, holding my hand when I stepped out of my chair, leaning in attentively when I spoke, making sure I had everything I needed. But it was more than that. His behavior was different. The way his compliments lingered, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at me, the way his voice softened when he said my name. It felt like he wasn't just treating me like his mother, he was treating me like someone special. I should have felt self-conscious, out of place in such a beautiful setting, but with Daniel I didn't. For the first time in years I felt seen. The food was exquisite, but I barely noticed it. The real magic was in the conversation. We talked about everything, our memories, our struggles, our dreams. I had always been close to my son, but this night felt different. There was an intimacy, a closeness that went beyond anything we had shared before. "I never told you this," he said, swirling his glass of wine, "but when I was younger I used to stay up late just to listen to you working in the kitchen." I blinked in surprise. "What? Why?" He smiled. "Because it made me feel safe. No matter how hard things got, I always knew you'd be there, making everything okay." My throat tightened. "Daniel." He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. His touch was warm, steady. "You've given me everything, Mom," he said softly. "Tonight, I just wanted to give something back to you." I swallowed hard, my emotions threatening to spill over. "I don't know what I did to deserve a son like you," I whispered. He squeezed my fingers gently. "Everything." The city stretched out before us, endless and glittering. The candle flickered between us, casting dancing shadows on our faces. And for the first time in my life I felt like I was living in a dream. The night stretched endlessly before us, the city shimmering like a sea of golden lights beneath the dark velvet sky. The soft hum of distant traffic, the occasional flicker of a neon sign, the cool night air that carried the scent of something I couldn't quite name, it all felt surreal. Like I had stepped out of my life and into a dream. I rose from my seat, my heels clicking softly against the polished floor, and walked towards the edge of the rooftop. My breath caught as I looked out over the endless sprawl of the city. From up here, everything seemed so peaceful. The worries that had weighed me down for years, work, bills, my husband's illness, the exhaustion that had become my constant companion, felt far away. Small. For the first time in years I felt light. I wrapped my arms around myself, lost in the moment. I didn't hear Daniel approach, but I felt him. A warmth at my side, a presence that had become so familiar, yet somehow felt different tonight. He came to stand beside me, silent at first, letting the moment settle between us. It's beautiful, isn't it? I murmured, still gazing at the endless horizon. Yeah, he said softly. But when I turned to look at him, his eyes weren't on the city. They were on me. The way he looked at me made my breath hitch. It wasn't just admiration. It was something deeper, something that sent a quiet shiver down my spine. The flickering rooftop lights cast shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his jaw, the soft curve of his lips. He wasn't a little boy anymore. The realization settled deep inside me, twisting something in my chest. I should have looked away. I should have said something to break the moment, to bring us back to something familiar, something safe. But I didn't. Instead, we stood there, suspended in time, the air between us charged with something unspoken. I didn't know who moved first. One second we were standing there, staring at each other, the city stretching endlessly beneath us. And then, his lips were on mine. It was soft at first, tentative, like a question neither of us had dared to ask until now. I froze, my mind catching up to the sensation. The warmth of his mouth, the gentle pressure, the way his hand came up to cup my face, tilting my chin just slightly. It should have felt wrong. But it didn't. It felt like stepping into something inevitable, something that had been building quietly in the spaces between us. The world around us faded, the city lights turning into a blur of gold and white. For that moment there was no past, no future, only this. Only him. The kiss deepened, slow and intoxicating, sending a warmth through me that I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't a mother, wasn't someone weighed down by responsibilities. I was just a woman being held, being cherished, being wanted. When we finally pulled away, my breath was unsteady, my heart racing against my ribs. Daniel's forehead rested against mine, his hands still cradling my face as if he was afraid I might disappear. His voice was barely above a whisper. Tell me this isn't a dream. I let out a shaky breath, my fingers instinctively curling into the fabric of his shirt. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know if this is real or if I'll wake up tomorrow and... He silenced me with another kiss, slower this time as if trying to prove that this was real. And in that moment I didn't care. I didn't care what was right or wrong, what the world would say, what tomorrow would bring. Because for the first time in my life I wasn't just surviving. I was living.